All right, we're edging up on the start of the afternoon sessions. Whisper. She told me to whisper. Shh. Oh, that works, Rebecca. That's good. Hi, folks. We're going to try to drive on here in the post-lunch session of RU 2024. My name is Steve Lautzi. I'm on the program committee. Was a NCRA president in the last millennium, and with a passion for market and infrastructure development, I'll be moderating this segment that will highlight emerging and expanding markets. Says I'm supposed to pause, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker. As most of us know, San Francisco has led the nation in collection of source-separated organics for 25 years. And therefore 20 years before the passage of SB 1383. Our first speaker is Jack Macy. Jack's been at the heart of all of that last 25 years, that leadership on a national level, international level. Jack is the Zero Waste Program Manager for the San Francisco Environment Department, overseeing the city's zero waste staff in pursuit of the city's zero waste commitments. He has more than 36 years of experience in developing and managing innovative model, composting, recycling, and other zero waste policies and programs at the local and state level, including development of the first large-scale U.S. urban food composting program. He has long served on the boards of the California Organics Recycling Council, aka CORC, and Gaia, and has helped a wide variety of jurisdictions and organizations advance towards zero waste. Give it up for Jack Macy.
Hey, good afternoon. Good to see you all. Great to see so many, and actually I like it how many faces that I don't even know. It's just great to see how many people come in. Well, now that we've had that good lunch and we're digesting it together, and our bodies know what to do with those organics, let's talk about organics, especially excess food. And this presentation was one that I basically gave at CRA. I was asked to talk about it. And so I was like, you really want me to do it again? But so those of you who may have heard of CRA, apologies, this won't be identical. My goal here is to do a really high level. I've had many years of doing detailed presentations around how we do our organics collection. And most of you know about that, or how you're doing it, or others. So I want to kind of set the context high level of how we're approaching organics, kind of where we are now, and where we see ourselves going, and maybe a little, I think, a bit of a surprise at the end on that, our strategy. So let's see if I can get this to advance. Just find the right button. It's a tape button. Okay. I went too far. Okay, so I want to first frame this with our zero waste policy. We adopted one 22 years ago that I wrote and got passed, and it was more than just going for, we were going pure. We've always been kind of purists on some level, and being very ambitious. So we wanted to go to zero waste, but it wasn't just about getting zero waste to landfill. We framed, a key part of this was framing highest and best use, as well as producer and consumer responsibility. And one way of showing highest and best use is through the hierarchy. A lot of hierarchies. I like the Zero Waste International one here because it has a rethink, redesign. We just heard a great presentation around rethinking foodware, but there's also rethinking food production, redesigning it, reducing, reusing, recycling, compost, material recovery, residuals management. Those all have a role to play with organics as well as any other discarded materials. So in terms of zero waste, we've had different goals. The targets that we're focused on now are kind of our interim short-term targets for 2030, and that is to reduce disposal by half. This is a 2015 baseline, which for us is really challenging because, as you heard from Steve just say, we've been doing composting for a while, and we really had pretty mature programs. These were adopted in 2018 when we hosted the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco, and I worked with the C40 network of global cities. We were looking at how can we advance zero waste and set new targets. And the other one here, the first one, is saying reduce generation. We were seeing the challenge in California and beyond where we can be recycling and composting more, but our generation keeps increasing. So let's look at how we can reduce generation, really put a priority on the top of that hierarchy, as well as reducing disposal. So that is a key driver for us. Another way we are framing and driving this in our policy is through our climate action plan and policy. So we've actually codified those goals that you just saw in our code and as part of the climate action plan. And we created a new chapter that I got to help write, which was how do we bring in zero waste work in climate action? And we framed it as responsible production and consumption, because it's really looking at the whole life cycle of materials and thinking about the impact of production and consumption. We did a consumption-based inventory to link to that. And then there's a link to healthy ecosystems. So I just want to quickly illustrate some of the things that we have in the climate action plan that relate to how we're dealing with organics. A lot of the stuff we were doing before, but it's a way of helping to support and push that. So one is that we want to be reducing food waste, and we are part of this Pacific Coast Collaborative network from California up to British Columbia, where they set a goal of reducing food waste by half by 2030. And so we want to do what we can around that. And an example is that there's sort of procurement. This can be both looking at how food is produced as well as how we're handling it. And looking at how it's produced, our influence there, of course, is around procurement. So we have the Good Food Purchasing Guide, which is a framework that we're really pushing, particularly where we have leverage in city agencies around preferred purchasing and procurement. Then we've been doing a fair amount, particularly in recent years, around providing technical assistance and financial assistance to help various entities, particularly business, commercial, institutional generators, around both food waste reduction as well as food donation. So helping them use various technology platforms, apps, and just funding basic infrastructure from collection to refrigeration and so forth. We've been able to get a couple of CalRecycle grants to help support that. And then we have, as a result of 1383, we had a long history of supporting edible food infrastructure going back to 1995, our first grant to the food bank that I was involved in. And so this was a way that when 1383 passed and they had that mandate of 20%, we actually got that as well. We made that a policy and are working to implement that. So how's that going on the edible food side? It's really, I think it's one thing that's great about 1383 is it's forcing us to be really proactive in contacting all those tier 1 and tier 2 generators. We've got a few of them, 253 tier 1, 236 tier 2. We actually have about 4,400, and that's down from the pre-COVID peak, food establishments in San Francisco. But as you know, most restaurants don't fall under this. So this is hitting the biggest ones. Still a fair amount, almost 400 food recovery organizations. And with the assistance, the CalRecycle grants that we've given, and a lot of outreach and so forth, we're working with our public health department, really getting them to play a more key role than we have had in the past. We were able to have about 2,500 tons of edible food reported to us. I think that's pretty good. There's certainly more going on out there than what we got formally reported. But that's a good framework to help push us. Another part of the climate action plan is just about looking at the opportunities across beyond organics around reducing, repairing, reuse. And so we're working on reusable foodware. We've been doing that for a long time. We're trying to get a policy passed again, requiring on-site reusables. Textiles, which technically, are covered in 1383 as part of organics. Reducing. We're doing fix-it clinics. And a key part here is that including increasing compliance for our mandatory source separation program. So let me just talk about that. We started composting over 25 years ago. It was voluntary. There were a lot of financial incentives. We provided a lot of assistance. And we knew that we wanted to make it mandatory. And we really waited. That was my timer, but that was just an 8-minute timer. We made it mandatory really at the time because while we were in all sectors, there were areas around multifamily, multi-tenant, and that we needed to make more progress. And our approach with mandatory was pretty simple. We wanted everybody, every property to separate out organics, more than a single family, more than a multifamily. Even if you were in a food establishment, didn't have a kitchen, you still had organics. Everybody needed to separate that out separately along with recyclables. So really comprehensive. Years later, we added another piece to it, which was targeting the largest generators that were often really complex. In our experience of working with venues, events, having people coming in to help manage sort materials to help better source separate, call them zero waste facilitators. 500 largest generators in the city, if they fail an audit or any of those 3 streams, recycling, composting, or the wrong things in trash, they can be required to hire, engage a zero waste facilitator. So our approach in that primarily over the years, our priority on that was to make sure everybody had adequate service and really focusing on making sure that everybody had the program at the level that they needed to have it. And we achieved, years ago, almost 100%, 99.8%. The only reason it's not 100 is there's just a certain amount of turnover that's inevitable. So you take a snapshot in time and you might find a new business or something that quite didn't get it. So that's a pretty successful metric. Now we call service compliance. Participation compliance is harder. If we were all looking at every bin every day carefully, then we could maybe better measure that. Practical level, we can't. So how has our program gone? This is a view of what the collections look like over the last 16 and a half years through basically the end of 23. So this starts here after we've had the program for about 10 years, but before our mandatory, and it's kind of the longest timeline I can sort of squeeze in a graph. But you can see that there's a steep curve there, and that's when we passed mandatory in 2009. We actually were promoting it before it passed, so we had the impact of that even before. And then you see it kind of leveled out. Well, we had a mature program, and it started leveling it out. But during those years when we were over 600, 650, 700 tons a day, we were collecting, and most of this was food scraps because we're a dense city with not a lot of yard space, yard trimmings. Huge commercial food sector. We were collecting not only more organics, but more food scraps than recyclables in our curbside program. And arguably, I would say, bigger environmental benefit, locally being recycled back into healthy soils, big climate benefit. But look, there's just a huge drop off. And that drop off is March 2020. And so that was the impact of COVID. I will say that the Climate Action Plan also ties in the use of compost for carbon sequestration, and so we're working on that with carbon farming. I'm going to just zoom through the last couple. 1383, we've got the challenge of procurement. A density like ours, way more compost than we could apply locally, so we're helping to support regional use of compost, small farms, groups like Zero Footprint, as well as our local entities to do what we can on compost use. I want to highlight on 2 key challenges and a punchline. So even as a mature program, we still have challenges. Contamination, problem of plastics, and 11% of film plastics showing up in the collected compostables on a 2020 study. Almost all of that, virtually all of that, was just regular plastics. Compostable plastics, even though we allow certain types, very tiny percent. And the other challenge we have is that we have way too much organics in our trash. This is the last comprehensive characterization sort we did. 2020, COVID impacted, so there was a bit of an asterisk there. But look, small generators, 33% of the stuff that should have gone in the green bin, readily compostable, was 33% of what was in our trash bins compostable for small generators, 23% for large generators. So my punchline on this is, even with a mature program like San Francisco, if we're serious about going towards, as far as we can, for zero waste, if we're serious about reducing our impact on the climate and getting organics out of the landfill, meeting 1383 and beyond, then we can't, in our experience in this dense, complex city like San Francisco, we can go further if we look at the trash and process that. So my last slide, the strategies that we're looking at, we can improve, always do more outreach. As much outreach we've done, we can always do more, so we're working on improving that. We're also looking at improving the monitoring, route monitoring with better on-truck cameras, working with Recology on that. Recology, our dedicated service provider, should acknowledge them. We use contamination charges as the main financial mechanism to penalize people if they don't sort correctly after plenty of warnings and assistance. We're also looking at improving processing. Recology is starting to screen the material before they transfer it. And then finally, what may be the surprise here is that we see a role for processing the trash, and that's what we're working on now. And actually been looking at that for quite some time. So that is the goal, that we won't complete our vision and make the quantum leap to get to our 2030 goals without pulling out organics and recyclables out of trash. And there are many options to doing that, and there are a number of facilities that are doing that quite well, and we're looking at them. And with that, I think I should stop. Yeah. You didn't pull me back. I was waiting for Steve's cane or something, but yeah. So do we have time for questions? Don't tempt me.
We could have one question.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to come find me afterwards.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry my email's not up there, but it's jack.macy and then at sfgov.org. But come find me. I also have a bunch of colleagues here.
I have a question for you. Hi, I saw as part of your ordinance for large refuse generators, you require them to have a zero waste coordinator. How do you enforce that?
Well, so basically the way that law works is that they are supposed to get a comprehensive audit of their three streams at least every 3 years. And if they fail that audit, they exceed certain thresholds that we've exceeded, then we give them an order from the city saying, you have to engage a zero waste facilitator. And we work with them in putting together that plan, making sure they find one, figuring out how they do that, different roles that they can play, including making sure the materials that are getting collected have been sorted properly, so it often involves that back-end sorting. And we have enforcement mechanisms where we've been doing this now for about 4 years, a lot of assistance, but we're getting ready to start pulling the trigger. We can find properties up to $1,000 a day if we need to.
Fine, Jack.
Thank you.